I'm 28 years old, and my name is Claudia. I once had what seemed like a normal family in our small Wisconsin town. But that house where I grew up became a prison of betrayal. Sometimes the deepest wounds come from those who should protect us the most. My mother did the unthinkable when she chose my sexual assaulter over me. She even let him move into our family home. Before I share my story, where are you watching from? Hit subscribe if you've ever felt betrayed by family, and stay with me to see how I finally found freedom. Growing up in a middle-class neighborhood in Madison, Wisconsin, I thought our family was like any other. We lived in a two-story colonial with blue shutters and a white picket fence. From the outside, everything looked picture perfect. But inside those walls, things were very different. My mother, Amanda, was the type of woman who micromanaged every aspect of her children's lives. Her own appearance was always immaculate, not a hair out of place. Designer clothes, perfect makeup even to go check the mail. That same perfectionism extended to how she treated me. Nothing I did was ever good enough. My grades, my appearance, my friends. She found fault with everything. Claudia, stand up straight. No one will ever take you seriously if you slouch like that, she would snap when we had company over. That outfit makes you look heavier than you already are, was a common morning greeting before school. My father, Thomas, worked as a corporate lawyer. He spent most of his time at the office, and when he was home, he buried himself in paperwork or golf magazines. He was the classic conflict avoider. Whenever tensions rose between my mother and me, he would suddenly remember an urgent email he needed to send. "Your mother knows best," was his standard response to any complaint I brought to him. "Just try to make her happy, Claudia." Then there was my sister Bella, 3 years younger than me and the golden child of the family. Whatever Bella did was perfect in my mother's eyes. Where I got criticism for an A-, Bella got praise for a B+. Where my drawing was messy, hers was creative. The double standard was impossible to miss. One memory that stands out was my high school graduation. I had worked so hard to be valedictorian, staying up late, studying while maintaining the extracurriculars my mother insisted on. The morning of graduation, I put on the dress we had bought together. "What were you thinking putting that on? It shows every single flaw in your figure," my mother said the moment she saw me. "Everyone will be looking at you on that stage. Do you want to embarrass us?" I ended up giving my speech in a different outfit that my mother deemed acceptable, fighting back tears the entire time. What should have been one of the proudest moments of my life was ruined because I didn't look the way my mother wanted. My friend Jane was the first person to put a name to what was happening. We met in sophomore year of high school when we were paired for a biology project. Jane came from a warm, supportive family, and she noticed things about my home life that I had normalized. "The way your mom talks to you isn't normal, Claudia," she told me one day after witnessing a particularly harsh criticism about my hair. "That's emotional abuse." I didn't believe her at first. After all, my mother had always told me she was just trying to help me be my best self. But Jane planted a seed of awareness that would eventually grow. College was my first real taste of freedom. I attended the University of Minnesota far enough from home that weekend visits weren't expected. For 4 years, I thrived without my mother's constant criticism. I made friends, joined clubs, discovered my passion for marketing, and even had a few relationships. I started to understand what normal interactions felt like. But whenever I showed this newfound independence, my mother's behavior escalated. If I didn't answer her calls immediately, she would call the resident advisor claiming she was worried about my safety. If I posted photos with friends on social media, she would send long texts analyzing everything wrong with my appearance. When I brought home a boyfriend for Thanksgiving my junior year, she spent the entire visit pointing out his flaws to me in whispered comments. After graduation, the 2008 recession was in full swing. The marketing job I had lined up fell through, and I found myself with student loans to pay and limited options. That's how I ended up making the decision that would change everything. I moved back into my childhood home, telling myself it was just temporary until I found a job and saved enough for my own place. Little did I know that moving back home would lead to the worst betrayal imaginable. 5 months after moving back home, my mother started mentioning someone named Travis. He was the son of her friend Deborah from her country club, and he had recently moved to town to start a job at a local investment firm. "He comes from such a good family." My mother would say, her voice filled with that admiration she reserved for people with money and status. Graduated from Dartmouth. His father owns half the real estate in Boston. It didn't take long to realize my mother was trying to set us up. She would casually mention that Travis was coming over for dinner, then make sure I wore something she approved of, and spend extra time on my hair and makeup. She would steer conversations toward topics she thought would impress him, and find excuses to leave us alone together. The first time I met Travis, I understood why my mother was so taken with him. He was conventionally handsome, with dark hair, blue eyes, and the kind of confident smile that opened doors. He drove an expensive car, wore designer clothes, and had that polished charm that comes from attending the right schools and knowing the right people. But something about him made me uneasy. Maybe it was the way his eyes lingered too long when my mother wasn't looking, or how he stood just slightly too close when we were introduced. Or perhaps it was the way he talked over me whenever I spoke. "I'm not interested, Mom," I told her after that first dinner. "He's not my type." "Not your type," she scoffed. "Claudia, he's successful, handsome, and from a good family. What more could you possibly want? You're not exactly in a position to be picky." Despite my clear disinterest, Travis started showing up everywhere. Sunday family dinners, Saturday afternoon barbecues, even random weeknight visits where my mother would text me last minute, "Travis is coming over for coffee. Make sure you're presentable." Each time the red flags became more obvious. He would touch my arm or shoulder during conversations, letting his hand stay just a little too long. He would make comments about my appearance that sounded like compliments, but felt invasive. He would find ways to bring up sexual topics in casual conversation, watching my reaction closely. "Mom, Travis makes me uncomfortable." I tried explaining after he had cornered me in the kitchen at a family dinner, standing so close I was backed against the counter with no easy way to move past him. "Oh, Claudia, he's just being friendly," she dismissed with a wave of her hand. "This is why you're still single. You overanalyze everything. He's interested in you, and instead of being flattered, you're finding problems." As the weeks passed, Travis became an increasingly common presence in our home. He charmed my father with discussions about golf and investments. He brought my sister little gifts that made her giggle and blush. And most disturbingly, he wormed his way into being my mother's confidant. I would walk into rooms to find them in deep conversation that would abruptly stop when I appeared. The first serious boundary crossing happened at a 4th of July barbecue my parents hosted. I was helping carry dishes into the kitchen when Travis followed me inside. While I was loading the dishwasher, he came up behind me, pressed his body against mine, and put his hands on my waist. "We would be so good together, Claudia," he whispered in my ear. "Your mother thinks so too." I pushed him away and told him clearly, "Don't touch me like that again, I'm not interested." He just smiled that confident smile. "You'll change your mind. Everyone does eventually." When I tried to tell my mother what had happened, her response was predictable, but still painful. "You're making a mountain out of a molehill," she said. "He's a physical person. That's just his way of showing he likes you." "I don't want him to like me," I insisted, "and I don't want him touching me." "Well, maybe if you weren't so cold all the time, you wouldn't still be single at 23, she snapped back. I could feel the situation escalating, but I had no idea just how bad things would get. Labor Day weekend. My parents were hosting another one of their famous backyard gatherings. Neighbors, colleagues, and friends from the country club all milling around with plastic cups of my father's famous punch, which was famous primarily for how much alcohol it contained. I had spent most of the party sticking close to Jane, who had come as my buffer. But she had to leave early for her shift at the hospital where she worked as a nurse. After she left, I tried to make myself useful by cleaning up some of the empty plates and cups that had accumulated. The house was mostly empty, with the party concentrated in the backyard. I was alone in the kitchen, rinsing dishes, when I heard the door swing open behind me. I didn't need to turn around to know it was Travis. Something in the energy of the room changed the moment he entered. "Finally, a moment alone with the elusive Claudia," he said, his voice carrying that practiced charm that never reached his eyes. "I'm just cleaning up," I replied, keeping my attention on the sink. "You should head back to the party." Instead, I heard his footsteps approaching. Then I felt him directly behind me. "Your mother thinks we should be together," he said, his breath warm against my neck. "She told me you're just playing hard to get, that it's your way of showing interest." I turned around quickly, not wanting him at my back, but this just put me facing him with the counter behind me. "My mother doesn't speak for me. I've been clear that I'm not interested." That's when his expression changed. The charming mask slipped, revealing something cold and angry underneath. "Do you have any idea how many women would kill to be with me, and you keep acting like you're too good?" He moved forward, pinning me against the counter with his body. One hand gripped my wrist painfully, while the other went to my face, not in a caress, but as a way to hold me in place. What happened next still comes to me in fragments. The sickening feeling of being trapped, his mouth forcing itself on mine, my free hand pushing against his chest, the sound of a glass breaking as I knocked it off the counter in my struggle, his hand moving from my face to under my shirt, my knee finally connecting with his groin, the look of shock and rage on his face as he doubled over, me running from the kitchen to my bedroom, locking the door behind me with shaking hands. I sat on the floor with my back against the door, trying to control my breathing as I called Jane. My whole body was trembling so hard I could barely hold the phone. "He attacked me," I managed to say when she answered. "Travis, in the kitchen. He had me pinned against the counter, and he—" "I'm coming back right now," Jane said immediately. "Do you need me to call the police?" I looked down at myself. There would be bruises on my wrist tomorrow. My lip was swollen where he had forced his kiss. But I knew how these things went. It would be his word against mine, and my own mother was already on his side. "No police," I said. "Not yet. Can you just come back? I don't want to be alone." "I'll be there in 15 minutes, Jane promised. "Lock your door and don't let anyone in until I get there." After hanging up, I sat there trying to process what had just happened. How could I face going downstairs again? What if Travis was still there? What would I say to my parents? My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Where did you go? Travis said you seemed upset. Come back to the party." That text made my decision for me. I needed to tell my mother what happened. Surely once she knew, she would throw Travis out and cut ties with him. No matter our difficulties, she was still my mother. She would protect me when it really mattered. I waited until Jane arrived. She came straight to my room, having been let in by a party guest who recognized her. After hugging me and checking that I wasn't badly hurt, she offered to come with me to talk to my mother. We found her in the dining room arranging a dessert platter. Travis was nowhere to be seen. "Mom, I need to talk to you," I said, my voice still shaky. "In private." She looked annoyed at the interruption but followed me to my father's study, which was well away from the party. Jane squeezed my hand before letting me go in alone with my mother. "Travis assaulted me in the kitchen," I said, getting straight to the point. "He pinned me against the counter and forced himself on me. He wouldn't stop until I need him." I expected shock, outrage, maternal protection. What I got was suspicion. Her eyes narrowed as she looked me up and down. "What do you mean by forced himself? What exactly are you accusing him of?" I explained what had happened in more detail, showing her my wrist where red marks were already forming. But with each word, I could see her expression hardening. "And what did you do to encourage this?" she asked when I finished. The question hit me like a physical blow. Encourage? I didn't encourage anything. I've told him repeatedly I'm not interested. "Well, Travis already told me what happened," she said, crossing her arms. "He said you were flirting with him all day, then invited him into the kitchen. He said you kissed him, then suddenly freaked out and attacked him for no reason." "That's a lie." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Mom, he attacked me. Why would I make this up?" "You've always been jealous of anyone I give attention to," she said coldly. "First your sister, and now Travis. You've never known how to share the spotlight." I stared at her in disbelief. "This isn't about attention. This is about him assaulting me in our home." My father chose that moment to enter the study. "What's going on?" "People are asking where you both are." My mother turned to him. "Claudia is making accusations against Travis. Says he assaulted her." She used air quotes around the word assaulted, as if it were a concept too dramatic to be taken seriously. I turned to my father desperately. Dad, please. He attacked me in the kitchen. Mom won't believe me. My father looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. Well, that's a very serious accusation, sweetheart. Are you sure there wasn't just a misunderstanding? A misunderstanding? I repeated, my voice rising. He had me pinned against the counter. He held me down while he kissed me and put his hands under my clothes. What part of that could be a misunderstanding? Lower your voice, my mother hissed. The party is still going on. We don't need to make a scene. A scene? I was just sexually assaulted in our kitchen, and you're worried about making a scene. I think everyone needs to calm down, my father said using his lawyer voice. Claudia, why don't you stay in your room for the rest of the party? We can discuss this tomorrow when everyone is cooled off. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Neither of my parents believed me, or worse, they didn't care. As if to confirm this, my mother added, Travis comes from a very respected family. His father is a personal friend of your father's boss. These are not the kind of people we make enemies of with wild accusations. At that moment, the door opened again, and my sister Bella peeked in. What's going on? Travis just left looking really upset. Your sister is having one of her episodes, my mother said dismissively. I am not having an episode, I shouted. He attacked me. Bella looked at me skeptically. Travis wouldn't do that. He's always super nice. Plus, he has a girlfriend back in Boston. Why would he be interested in you? The betrayal was complete. My entire family had chosen a man they barely knew over me. A man who had attacked me in our own home. I left the study without another word, returning to my room where Jane was waiting. I told her what had happened with my family, tears streaming down my face. You're not staying here tonight, she said firmly. Pack a bag. You're coming to my apartment. As I packed an overnight bag, I wondered if anything would ever be the same again. I had just experienced the worst violation of my life, only to have it compounded by my family's betrayal. How do you come back from that? The next morning, I woke up on Jane's couch, feeling hollow. Part of me hoped that with the party over and the night past, my mother might have reconsidered her position. Maybe in the light of day, she would realize how wrong she had been to doubt me. Jane had to work, but she made me breakfast before leaving and told me I could stay as long as I needed. I spent the morning in a daze, alternating between numbness and waves of panic, as flashbacks of Travis pinning me against the counter kept intruding into my thoughts. Around noon, I decided it was time to go home and face my family. I needed to try one more time to make them understand what had happened. When I pulled into our driveway, I noticed a familiar car parked in front of our house. My stomach dropped. It was Travis's black BMW. For a moment, I considered driving away. But this was my home. I shouldn't have to hide from it because of him. Gathering every ounce of courage I had, I walked through the front door. The sound of laughter came from the living room. When I entered, I froze in the doorway. Travis was sitting on our couch, holding a coffee mug, chatting and laughing with my mother as if nothing had happened. My father was nowhere to be seen, probably at work. But Bella was curled up in an armchair, smiling at something Travis had just said. They all looked up when I entered. Travis had the audacity to smile at me. Claudia, there you are, my mother said, as if I had just stepped out for a few minutes rather than fled after being assaulted. Look who stopped by to check on how the party went. I couldn't speak. The casual normality of the scene was so jarring compared to the trauma of the previous night that I felt like I was in some sort of twisted nightmare. Can I talk to you? I finally managed to say to my mother, my voice barely above a whisper. Alone. She looked annoyed but stood up. Excuse us for a moment, she said to Travis with a warm smile that made my skin crawl. Once we were in the kitchen, the very room where I had been attacked, I turned to her in disbelief. How could you invite him back into our house after what he did to me? He came by to apologize for the misunderstanding, she said, her voice cold. Which is more than I can say for you, leaving in the middle of our party and embarrassing us in front of our guests. Misunderstanding Mom, he sexually assaulted me. He said you kissed him and then overreacted when he responded. Given your history of dramatic behavior, I'm inclined to believe him. I stared at her, truly seeing her for perhaps the first time in my life. My history of dramatic behavior. You mean all the times I've objected to being criticized and controlled by you? This is exactly what I'm talking about, she said with an exasperated sigh. Everything is always someone else's fault with you, Claudia. You never take responsibility for your actions. What actions am I supposed to take responsibility for being attacked in my own home, having my own mother not believe me? You've always exaggerated things for attention, she said dismissively. Ever since you were a little girl. Remember when you told your teacher that we never fed you because you didn't like the dinner I made one night? That incident had happened when I was 7 years old. I had told my teacher I was hungry because I didn't like the fish my mother had made, and the teacher had misunderstood. My mother had never let me forget it. That was 20 years ago, and it was a misunderstanding, I said, feeling the familiar defensiveness rising. This is completely different. This is about a man who physically assaulted me while you were hosting a party in the backyard. Travis is from a good family. He has an excellent job. He has a reputation to protect. Why would he risk all that just to force himself on you? The implication was clear. She thought I wasn't worth risking anything for. In her mind, it made more sense that I was lying than that Travis would be interested enough to assault me. I can't believe you would take his side over your own daughter, I said, my voice breaking. I'm not taking sides. I'm just looking at this logically. I looked past her to where I could see Travis still sitting in our living room, completely at ease now, showing Bella something on his phone that was making her laugh. The sight made me physically ill. I'm going to stay with Jane for a while, I said, turning back to my mother. Don't be ridiculous. This is your home. You can't run away every time something doesn't go your way. I'm not running away. I'm keeping myself safe from a man who assaulted me since my own family won't. I went upstairs to pack more of my things, my hands shaking with a mixture of rage and disbelief. How could this be happening? How could my mother invite my attacker back into our home and treat him like a welcome guest? As I was packing, my sister appeared in the doorway of my bedroom. Mom says you're making up stories about Travis, she said, her arms crossed. I'm not making anything up, Bella, I said tiredly. He assaulted me in the kitchen during the party. She rolled her eyes in a perfect imitation of our mother. He wouldn't do that. He's too good for you anyway. The casual cruelty of her words stung, but by this point I was almost numb to additional pain. You don't know him, Bella. None of you do. I know him better than you think, she said with a smug smile. We've been texting. He's actually really sweet. I looked at my 20-year-old sister and felt a surge of protective instinct despite everything. Be careful around him, Bella. He's not who he pretends to be. She laughed. God, you're so jealous it's pathetic, just because he likes me better than you. There was no point in arguing further. She had already decided who the villain was in this story, and it wasn't Travis. I finished packing a larger suitcase with more of my clothes and essential items. As I headed back downstairs, Travis was still there now, helping my mother plan some sort of dinner party. They both looked up as I passed the living room with my suitcase. Running away again, Claudia? My mother asked sharply. I'm going somewhere I'll be safe, I replied, not stopping. As I loaded my suitcase into my car, I heard footsteps behind me. It was Travis following me out to the driveway. My heart rate instantly spiked. Your mother doesn't believe you, he said quietly, his voice carrying that same smug confidence from the night before. No one does. You should just apologize for overreacting and move on. I got in my car without responding and locked the doors immediately. As I backed out of the driveway, I could see him in my rearview mirror watching me leave with a satisfied smile. I didn't realize it then, but that would be the last time I would set foot in my family home as a daughter. The final betrayal was yet to come. The next 2 weeks were a blur. Jane let me crash on her couch while I tried to figure out what to do next. I was still jobless with minimal savings, and now essentially homeless as well. The trauma of both the assault and my family's response left me alternating between numbness, panic attacks, and crying spells. Jane convinced me to see a therapist, even driving me to the appointment when I didn't feel up to going alone. The therapist, a compassionate woman named Dr. Reeves, helped me understand that what had happened wasn't my fault, regardless of what my mother had implied. What your mother did is called secondary victimization, Dr. Reeves explained gently. Sometimes when people hear about sexual assault, especially when it involves someone they know or trust, they find it easier to blame the victim than to accept that someone they care about could do something so terrible. It made sense intellectually, but emotionally, the betrayal still cut bone deep. This was my mother, the person who was supposed to protect me from harm, not invited into our home. I had been avoiding my phone, tired of seeing the manipulative texts from my mother that ranged from guilt trips, "After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us," to gaslighting, "You always make such a big deal out of nothing," to faux concern, "We're worried about your mental state." But 2 weeks after the assault, I received a call from Bella. I almost didn't answer, remembering her cruel words the last time we spoke. But some part of me still hoped that maybe, just maybe, she had realized the truth. "Hello," I answered cautiously. "Hey," Bella said, her voice casual, as if nothing had happened between us. "Just wanted to let you know there's going to be some changes around here. Travis is moving into the guest room for a while." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What did you just say?" "Travis is moving in. His lease ended, and Mom offered him the guest room until he finds a new place. Dad's helping him move his stuff in this weekend." I couldn't process what I was hearing. "Bella, he sexually assaulted me in our kitchen, and now Mom is inviting him to live in our house." "God, are you still on about that?" She sighed dramatically. "Nobody believes you, Claudia. You need to let it go." I hung up without another word, my entire body shaking. This was beyond betrayal. This was my mother actively putting my abuser in my childhood home, giving him a place of honor in our family while I was exiled for daring to speak the truth. I immediately called my mother, barely able to contain my rage and disbelief. "Is it true?" I demanded when she answered. "Are you really letting Travis move into our house?" "Hello to you too, Claudia," she said coolly. "Yes, Travis needed a place to stay when his lease unexpectedly ended. We had the room, and unlike some people, he appreciates what we do for him." "The man sexually assaulted me," I shouted into the phone. "How can you let him live in your house?" "That's your version of events which no one else believes," she replied calmly. "Travis has been nothing but a gentleman to everyone in this family." "Everyone except you seems to be able to see that." "What about Dad? Is he okay with this?" "Your father trusts my judgment. Travis has been a great help to him, actually. They're going golfing this weekend." The casual way she mentioned this, as if Travis was now a beloved family member while I was the outsider, made me feel physically ill. "I can't believe you're doing this," I said, my voice breaking. "Your own daughter." "When you're ready to apologize to Travis and stop this ridiculous attention-seeking behavior, you're welcome to come home," she said. "Until then, I think we all need some space from your drama." I ended the call and immediately broke down crying. Jane found me curled up on her bathroom floor, hyperventilating. That night, after Jane had helped calm me down and gotten me to eat a little soup, I called Dr. Reeves and scheduled an emergency session for the next day. "My mother is letting him move into our house," I told her, still in disbelief. "The man who assaulted me is going to be living in my family home." Dr. Reeves's expression was grave. "Claudia, I need to be very direct with you. What your mother is doing is not just unsupportive, it's actively harmful. You cannot go back to that environment." "But where am I supposed to go? I can't stay on Jane's couch forever. I don't have a job yet. My savings are almost gone." "We'll figure that out," she assured me. "But your safety, both physical and psychological, has to be the priority right now." We spent the rest of the session making a plan. The first step was to secure my important documents and irreplaceable possessions from my parents' house. Jane offered to go with me, but I knew I needed to do this myself to have this final confrontation. I waited until a time I knew Travis would be at work. My father would be at his office, and with luck, my mother might be at her weekly hair appointment. Bella had classes at the community college she attended. When I pulled up to the house, I was relieved to see no cars in the driveway. I still had my key, and I let myself in quietly, half expecting to find evidence of Travis's presence already. A jacket thrown over a chair, a different coffee mug in the sink. But the house looked the same as always. I went straight to my bedroom and began gathering my birth certificate, passport, social security card, and other important documents from the lockbox I kept in my closet. I packed photo albums that couldn't be replaced, jewelry that had been given to me by my grandmother, and a few sentimental items from my childhood. I was almost finished when I heard the front door open and close, footsteps on the stairs. Then my mother appeared in the doorway of my bedroom. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice cold. "Getting my things," I replied, continuing to pack. "I won't be coming back." "Don't be ridiculous, Claudia. Where will you go? You don't have a job. You barely have any savings left." "I'd rather be homeless than live under the same roof as the man who assaulted me," I said, zipping up my backpack. "If you leave like this, don't expect to be welcomed back," she warned. "Your father and I have had enough of your accusations and drama." I turned to face her fully. "Do you hear yourself? You're choosing a man you barely know over your own daughter. You're letting my attacker move into your home, while threatening to disown me for telling the truth about what he did." "The truth as you see it," she corrected. "No one else witnessed what happened." "That doesn't mean it didn't happen," I was shouting now, years of pent-up rage finally boiling over. "Why would I lie about something like this? What could I possibly have to gain?" "Attention as always," she said dismissively. "You've never been able to stand not being the center of attention." In that moment, something inside me finally broke free. All the years of trying to please this woman, of accepting her criticism and control, of doubting my own perceptions, because she told me to, I was done. "You know what, Mom, I feel sorry for you," I said, my voice suddenly calm. "Because one day you're going to realize what you've done. You're going to understand that you threw away your relationship with your daughter for a man who assaulted her, and by then, it will be too late to fix it." I shouldered my backpack and picked up the small suitcase I had packed. As I moved toward the door, my father appeared behind my mother, having apparently come home during our argument. "Claudia, don't do this," he said, his voice tired. "Your mother and I just want what's best for you." "No, Dad, you want what's easiest for you," I corrected him. "Standing up for me would mean conflict, and you've spent your entire life avoiding that, even when it means failing to protect your own daughter." He flinched, but didn't contradict me. He knew it was true. "If either of you ever decide that your daughter is worth believing, you have my number," I said, pushing past them. "Until then, don't contact me." As I walked out of my childhood home for the last time, I felt something unexpected relief. The weight of trying to earn my mother's approval, of navigating her constant criticism and control, was lifting. I was walking away from people who had proven in the most painful way possible that they would never put my well-being first. In the driveway, I paused and looked back at the house one last time. My mother and father stood in the doorway watching me go. Neither called out for me to come back. Neither ran after me. They just watched in silence as I got in my car and drove away from them forever. The first few months after cutting ties with my family were some of the hardest of my life. I stayed with Jane while frantically job hunting, eventually landing an entry-level position at a small marketing firm. The pay was barely enough to cover rent on a tiny studio apartment across town, but it was mine, and it was safe. Meanwhile, my mother wasted no time in controlling the narrative within our extended family. My phone filled with texts and calls from aunts, uncles, and cousins, all repeating the same message: I was being dramatic. I needed to apologize. Family was too important to throw away over a misunderstanding. I tried explaining my side at first, but it quickly became clear that my mother had gotten to them first with her version of events. According to her, I had made unwanted advances toward Travis, then accused him of assault when he rejected me. I was mentally unstable, attention-seeking, and now refusing to come home out of spite. After a particularly painful call with my Aunt Meredith, who had always been kind to me, but now told me I needed professional help for my delusions, I made the difficult decision to block my entire family on all platforms. Phone numbers, emails, social media, everything. The only person I didn't block was my father's sister, Aunt Karen, who lived in Seattle and had always been somewhat estranged from the family herself. To my surprise, Aunt Karen reached out to me directly about a month after I cut contact with my parents. "Your mother called me with some wild story about you having a breakdown," she said when I answered her call. "But I know my sister-in-law well enough to know there's another side to this. What really happened, Claudia?" For the first time, I told my story to a family member who actually listened, who didn't immediately doubt or dismiss me, who responded with appropriate horror at both Travis's actions and my mother's betrayal. "You did the right thing getting out of there," she told me firmly. Your mother has always been more concerned with appearances than reality, and your father has always been too weak to stand up to her. Her validation meant more than I could express. Aunt Karen became my one remaining connection to family, sending occasional care packages and checking in regularly to make sure I was okay. The support group for sexual assault survivors that Dr. Reeves recommended became another lifeline. Sitting in a circle with other women who understood what I had experienced without explanation, who nodded in recognition at the complicated feelings of violation, shame, and anger, helped me feel less alone. Some had been believed and supported by their families. Others, like me, had not. But all of us were finding ways to move forward. Dr. Marshall, my new therapist, who specialized in trauma, helped me understand that the betrayal by my family was its own separate trauma layered on top of the sexual assault itself. What we're dealing with is complex trauma, she explained. The assault was traumatic enough on its own, but the betrayal by your support system compounds it. Your brain is trying to process not just the violation of your physical boundaries, but the shattering of your basic assumption that family equals safety. The first holiday season after cutting contact was especially difficult. Thanksgiving had always been a big production at my parents' house, with my mother orchestrating everything to perfection. As November approached, I found myself having more flashbacks and nightmares, my anxiety spiking at the prospect of spending the holiday alone. Jane invited me to join her family, but I knew from experience that being around someone else's loving family would only highlight what I had lost. Instead, I accepted an invitation from two women from my support group who were also estranged from their families. We created our own Misfit Thanksgiving, cooking together in Danielle's apartment and sharing stories of holidays past, both good and bad. Christmas was harder. I woke up that morning in my studio apartment alone and broke down crying. But then I remembered something Dr. Marshall had said: you get to create new traditions now, ones that serve you, not harm you. So I made myself peppermint hot chocolate, put on my favorite music, instead of the classical Christmas albums my mother always insisted on, and spent the day doing exactly what I wanted. I called Aunt Karen, who was traveling in Europe for the holidays. I video chatted with Jane between her family obligations. I watched cheesy Christmas movies without anyone criticizing my choices. By the end of the day, I realized I had actually enjoyed Christmas for the first time in years. At work, I threw myself into learning everything I could about marketing. My boss, Melissa, recognized my dedication and began giving me more responsibility. By the 6-month mark, I had received my first small promotion. Slowly, I built a new life. A life without the constant criticism and control that had been my normal for so long. A life where I could set boundaries and have them respected. A life where the people around me believed me when I shared my experiences. I made new friends through work, through my support group, through a painting class I took on a whim. People who knew me only as I was, now not as the person my mother had tried to shape me into. People who saw my strength, not just my wounds. But healing wasn't linear. There were still days when something would trigger a flashback to the assault. Times when I would see a mother and daughter shopping together and feel a stab of grief for what I had lost, or never really had. Moments when I would pick up my phone to share news with my sister before remembering that she had chosen my abuser over me. Through it all, I held firm to the boundaries I had set. When a cousin reached out after being newly added to the family group chat and hearing about the situation, I politely but firmly explained that I wasn't interested in reconciliation unless my parents were willing to acknowledge what really happened and cut ties with Travis. He reported back that my mother had called me delusional again, and that was the end of that. The hardest test came when my grandfather, my father's father, passed away 8 months after I left. I received the news from Aunt Karen, not my parents. The funeral would mean seeing my entire family, including potentially Travis, who had apparently become so integrated into the family that he attended all major events. After much consideration and discussion with Dr. Marshall, I decided to go to the funeral but bring Jane as support. We planned to arrive just before the service began and leave immediately after avoiding the reception entirely. The plan worked until the end of the service when I found myself face to face with my mother in the church vestibule. She looked exactly the same, perfectly put together, in appropriate funeral attire. For a moment, neither of us spoke. "Your grandfather would be ashamed of how you've torn this family apart," she finally said, her voice low but sharp. Before I could respond, Jane stepped between us. "Mrs. Anderson, with all due respect, today is about honoring your father-in-law. This isn't the time or place for this discussion." My mother looked at Jane with thinly veiled contempt, but couldn't argue with her point, not with other mourners around to witness. She turned and walked away without another word to me. As Jane and I left the church, I caught sight of Travis standing with my father and sister, his arm casually draped over my sister's shoulders, in a way that made my blood run cold. But I kept walking head held high. I had said my goodbyes to my grandfather, and I didn't owe anyone else my presence. That night after Jane had gone home, I sat in my apartment and realized something important. I had faced my family and remained intact. Their disapproval, their judgment, even their presence no longer had the power to shatter me. I was building something stronger than what I had left behind. 3 years have passed since I walked out of my parents' house for the last time. So much has changed that sometimes it's hard to recognize my life now compared to then. I moved to Chicago 2 years ago for a promotion at a larger marketing agency. My tiny studio apartment has been replaced by a one-bedroom with big windows and a balcony where I grow herbs and flowers in the summer. The walls are painted colors my mother would hate, and every piece of furniture and art was chosen solely because I loved it. My career has flourished. I'm now a marketing executive specializing in campaigns for nonprofit organizations, work that feels meaningful and aligns with my values. My boss values my creativity and insight, and I've built a reputation as someone who delivers results without sacrificing integrity. Therapy continues to be an important part of my life, though the frequency has decreased as I've healed. Dr. Marshall helped me understand that while the assault and betrayal will always be part of my story, they don't have to define my future. I've learned to recognize triggers and develop tools to ground myself when memories surface. The nightmares that once plagued me weekly now only return during particularly stressful times. My support network has grown into something I never could have imagined when I was curled up on Jane's couch feeling utterly alone. Jane remains my closest friend, flying out to visit me in Chicago several times a year. I've made new friends who know my full story and support me unconditionally. My relationship with Aunt Karen has deepened, and she's become the maternal figure I always needed. One of the most healing things I've done is become an anonymous volunteer for a sexual assault survivors hotline. Being able to be the voice of belief and support for others who have experienced what I did gives purpose to my pain. Every time I tell a caller, "I believe you," and hear their relief, I heal a little more. Last year, I experienced an unexpected encounter that shook me. I was back in Madison for a cousin's wedding, one of the few family events I still attend since that side of the family had been more supportive. I was at the hotel bar after the reception when I literally bumped into my sister Bella, who was also staying there. For a moment, we just stared at each other. She looked older, more mature, but with the same perfectly styled hair and careful makeup our mother had always insisted on. I hadn't seen her since our grandfather's funeral 2 years earlier. "Claudia," she said, sounding genuinely surprised. "I didn't know you were coming." "Aunt Karen convinced me," I replied, already looking for an escape route. But instead of the hostility I expected, Bella seemed uncertain. "Can we talk just for a minute?" Against my better judgment, I agreed to sit with her at a corner table. We exchanged awkward small talk about the wedding before she finally said what she really wanted to say. "You were right about Travis," she said quietly, not meeting my eyes. "He wasn't who he pretended to be." I waited, not ready to make this easy for her. "About 6 months after you left, I caught him going through Mom's jewelry box. When I confronted him, he got really angry, scary angry. He grabbed my arm hard enough to leave bruises. Despite everything, I felt a surge of protectiveness toward my little sister." "Did he hurt you?" "Not beyond that. Dad walked in right after and saw the whole thing. He actually stood up to Mom for once and insisted Travis move out immediately." The revelation that Travis had finally shown his true colors to my family was both validating and infuriating. It had taken him threatening their golden child for them to believe what I had been saying all along. "Did Mom ever admit she was wrong about him?" I asked, already knowing the answer. Bella shook her head. She said he was under a lot of stress at work, that I had provoked him by accusing him of stealing. Even after he was gone, she never admitted she made a mistake. And what about her mistake with me? Did she ever acknowledge that? Again, Bella shook her head, looking uncomfortable. You know, Mom, she never admits she's wrong about anything. Then nothing has really changed, I said, finishing my drink and standing up. I'm glad you're okay, Bella. I really am. Wait, she said, reaching for my arm, but stopping short of actually touching me. Don't you want to try to fix things with the family? Now that Travis is gone, I looked at my sister, seeing both the little girl I had grown up with and the young woman who had participated in my betrayal. Travis was never the only problem, Bella. He was just the final straw. Nothing has been fixed if Mom still can't admit what she did to me. I left her sitting there feeling strangely peaceful. I didn't need that validation from my family anymore. I knew my truth, and I had built a life around people who respected and believed me. 6 months ago, I met Michael at a fundraising event for the Sexual Assault Crisis Center where I volunteer. He works in education policy and shares my passion for creating safer environments for vulnerable people. Our relationship has developed slowly with careful attention to boundaries and open communication. When I eventually told him about my past, he listened without judgment and thanked me for trusting him with my story. Building trust after trauma isn't easy. There are still moments when I find myself bracing for betrayal or dismissal. But Michael has been patient, understanding that my hesitation isn't about him, but about what I've experienced. He's become part of my chosen family, along with Jane, Aunt Karen, and the friends who have stood by me through everything. The hardest thing to explain to new people in my life is why I don't have contact with my parents or sister. Our society places so much emphasis on family ties that choosing to sever them is often met with confusion or judgment. I've learned to be selective about who I share my full story with, protecting myself from those who might respond with, "But they're still your family," or "You only get one mother." What these people don't understand is that cutting toxic family ties isn't just an ending. It's also a beginning. The beginning of healing, of self-discovery, of building connections based on mutual respect rather than obligation. The beginning of creating your own definition of family. Family should be the people who believe you when you're hurting, who protect you from harm instead of inviting it into your home, who value your well-being above appearances or convenience. I didn't have that in the family I was born into, but I found it in the family I've chosen. If you're watching this and struggling with similar betrayal, please know that you deserve to be believed. You deserve to be protected. You deserve people in your life who will choose you over your abuser every single time. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is walk away from those who harm us, even when society tells us we should stay because they're family. Have you ever had to cut ties with family for your own well-being? Share your story in the comments if you feel comfortable. And if you found value in my story, please subscribe and hit the like button. Your support helps stories like mine reach others who might be feeling alone in similar situations. Thank you for listening, and remember, blood doesn't define family love and respect do. Sometimes the most healing thing we can do is to release what hurts us, even when, especially when it's family.